It's not just that they're not fighting them, it just seems overwhelmingly to us that they are aiding and abetting them.
Well, let's be quite outspoken about this. From the very beginning, there was a particular planning officer who actually encouraged this bunker to go up.
Yep.
We won't mention his name, he's gone. But this, all the way through, they've been encouraged and they've been helped to get this deception going. And I think it's totally wrong. It's fallen back on residents to fight it. It's not fair. It's wrong. The council should be answerable to this. Absolutely.
I can't remember why I thought I didn't know I was back up. I said we wasn't going to be talking about the house ever again, but unfortunately it's got to be in this photograph because right next to the house are two other things. I did wonder whether I ought to blank the windows out here in case we were accused of using a telephoto lens, but there's two other things on this. In fact, there's three interesting bits on this diagram or photograph, irrespective of the house. One, the solar panels. That's the solar panels. In fact, let's come back and do it in order. Storage building here was the subject of a recent an application for a certificate of lawful use. You probably all know it, but I'll just explain what certificate of lawful use is. If I build something in my garden without planning permission, because I didn't know I needed planning permission, for example, as long as it's been there for 4 years, hasn't upset anybody, I haven't broken any rules for putting it there, it becomes lawful due to the passage of time. But I've got to get a certificate to prove that. And I'd write to the council and say, I'm ever so sorry, I've made a mistake. Can I have a certificate to say that I won't be pressured and this building is now legal, I can sell it or whatever I do with it. And that's called a certificate of lawful use, and that's what its certificate of lawful use is there for. However, lots of developers use it unlawfully, and these people have actually built this knowing they can't build there. There's loads of planning history to say that there's not allowed to be any structures, any cars, any caravans, anything at all on this area of the land. It's an amenity area only. There's some discretion or discrepancy whether they were allowed to put cars down there, but that's irrelevant. They weren't allowed to put a building down there. So when they put in a certificate of lawful use, which says that it's been there for 4 years, we all looked at each other and said, well, what are they doing this for? Because it's not to do with whether it's been there for 4 years or not. The fact that they've breached planning rules, they're building it where they've been expressly told not to, the 4-year rule doesn't apply. In that case, it's a 10-year rule. It needs to be there for 10 years without any enforcement action, and then they can put in for a certificate of lawful use. We've been fighting the council long and hard over this issue, and the council have just basically ignored us. We spent quite a lot of money on the barrister's fee as well. Totally ignored us and says it's a 4-year rule applies, it's been there for 4 years, nobody's complained about it, there's no enforcement, so it's now legal.
Well, I'll just add that I'm convinced that our planning department were aware of this storage building before it was built. They would, because there's correspondence on that. And yet, despite being aware of it, despite it not having planning permission, they sat and took no action for 4 years, which means after 4 years, Rocklands applied for a certificate of lawful use, which planning then just bent over backwards and gave them, despite the fact that we do believe that the 10-year rule applied. So there's two problems there. Once, number one, enforcement decided not to do anything, and then they ignored every rule on the certificate of lawful use. We're still investigating, and the good thing is, unlike the planning permission, a certificate of lawful use can be revoked if sufficient evidence is found.
You may wonder why we're concerned about a little storage unit, which isn't really affecting too many people. Yes, you can see it from the other side of the valley, but it's no different from a caravan out there. The reason we're opposed to it is because we know in our heart that exactly the same process is going to happen on the lower slopes in as little as 18 months' time. You've seen the aerial photographs. When they first started putting those unlawful structures on the lower slopes, unless there's enforcement action to say that they are actually unlawful and to be taken up, all they need to do is put in a certificate and say these have been here for 10 years, there's no enforcement action, can I please have my certificate? And the council have no control over giving it to them. The law says they've got to say yes, it is now legal. So our fight from now on, our fight from now really is to make sure that what happened on the storage unit cannot possibly happen on the lower slopes. It's the lower slopes that we're concerned about. So if we're getting a little bit too concerned about what appears to be small fry, it's not. It's all part of the big picture.
Yeah, because the unauthorised developments on the lower slopes include roads, car parks, terracing, sewage, drainage, some of which we believe have contributed to the landslip, and we believe unless those are removed, the landslip will continue. Clock is ticking, 18 months' time they will all become unenforceable and they could apply for a certificate of lawful use. We've pushed the council on taking enforcement action, on jumping subject. And we've got a rather lovely catch-22 situation. The council say, amongst other reasons, they can't take enforcement action because they don't know the stability of the slopes. But we've also been told they will not commission a further slope stability study to assess the stability of the slopes. So we're stuck in a catch-22 and they're not prepared to lift a finger or do anything.
Sorry, Chris, I just wondered what the reason is that when you ask them that they won't commission a report.
So at the moment, it's a little bit is about money, but basically they haven't answered us. They will. Basically, the answer to your question is that they won't tell us. There is about money, which we'll come to a little bit about how much they reckon it's going to cost to do a survey on there. So a bit of it's about money, but from what we see, the reason that they're holding back is there's some hidden agenda which is protecting these developers against enforcement action. David?
Well, can I just say that I think it is fairly evident that there is a systemic problem here. We can look at all the individual items and Bob's going through them, but there is a systemic problem, and that is that there is either corruption, coercion or such gross incompetence within the planning department and other departments associated with it, it's not just the planning department, that we stand really no chance of solving the whole lot without doing something about that. Now, it does need to be made clear that we're talking about the officers, the remarkably well paid by Hastings standard officers, not our elected politicians, who by and large have attempted to do the right thing. Now, whenever a question is asked to the politicians, they are not specialists in any of these areas. They rely on their officers to give them the chapter and verse for their responses, and time again those responses are full of inaccuracies, half-truths, downright lies. It is not as though any one person in the council, to my knowledge, has blown the whistle. Nobody has said there is wrongdoing going on here. Indeed, I'm being very careful how I choose my words, because on 2 occasions we, or I, have been warned off using the C word because of the fear of very heavy legal action. Now, I don't know any one person is corrupt. I have no information. I cannot gather the evidence. The only people that could gather the evidence are, I suppose, our elected council with the help of the police. I sympathise for our elected council, because if they were to find that the whole lot were in it together, either complicit or complicit by association or complicit by silence or complicit because they had been silenced, I feel very sorry for those people that may have been told that any whistleblowing on their part could be career limiting, and I'm sure there are some of them. I feel fairly certain there may be some of those, but there is a complete wall of problem. Now, you have to ask whether our councillors could possibly just sack the whole council structure and start again. Not really possible, but that is to my way of thinking, that is the scale and nature of the problem. Set my piece.
Thank you, David.
You're absolutely right. But there are those of us who think that the corruption is a very big part of it. I mean, a large part of it.
We don't have any evidence of
We don't,
corruption.
but we
We
can
have
feel
possibly
that.
symptoms that could be
Yeah,
explained by...
We feel it. No proof, but we just feel it.
Alistair.
Notwithstanding whether there is or whether there isn't corruption, from my point of view, the most important thing is that this area of outstanding natural beauty needs to in some way be, the rot needs to be stopped, the reparations need to be made so that it is actually secure and that there aren't further landslides. Notwithstanding that there also needs to be action taken to clean up Mugsborough, and once again, and actually try to actually resolve these problems. And without that, we need to work through the council. But if this council is not cooperating in the way that we feel it should be, then we need to look at other ways, therefore, that we can actually make the reparations that are needed. Doesn't mean you don't actually also need to sort out what's been going on at the council. But if we just focused on what was going on at the council and trying to clean it up, clean it all up, we would lose sight of the bigger picture, which is actually the area of outstanding natural beauty. In the meantime, the damage will continue to be done. So I think we need to work on both fronts. And I think we need to be quite distinct about which areas we're really working on.
Thank you. The other thing in this picture is these solar panels. There used to be 16 solar panels here a year ago. Because of this road that they put in here to actually start building this thing, I forgot what it's called, but it's building here. They actually took 3 of these panels away. The 3 panels on the end are still within the confines of the area of the Scheduled Ancient Monument. For those of you not sure, the East Hill, the complete East Hill of Hastings is an ancient monument. Tell me about how far it goes back to us.
It's 1st, 2nd century.
1st, 2nd century, and it's an uncharted piece of ground. They haven't actually done any proper historical digs on it or anything. So when they know there's a monument, it has to be protected until there's such a time that somebody can come in and find out exactly what the history is. This monument is the history of England, the history of the world, and it can't be destroyed. And there are rules, it has been. There are rules and there are companies that are trying to protect this, and we got a little bit of good news the other day, which I'll talk about in a second, about this. But in general, we're not only fighting the people that are doing this, but we're fighting the authorities that could do something about it to help us. I'm not going to talk too much about solar panels at the moment because Chris and I are going to possibly bring it into the conversation in a second. But what I will say is there's an application outstanding at the moment on the council website for the retention of these solar panels. The Rocklands Caravan site have put in an application to regularise these. It's a retrospective planning application to make these things legal. Only the other day we had a letter come through via the council from now Historic England, used to be English Heritage, to say that by putting the solar panels there in the first place, they have actually committed a criminal offence. They're not allowed to be there. Now we feel that is probably enough in itself that the application will be thrown out. If the council passes the application, they're condoning a criminal offence, and that can't happen. But they did.
I'm trying to build green now, shows that they build green with solar panels. Also, to build trees.
I think we'll come back to solar panels in a little bit, but we do still need people to write in on this. We've got another couple of weeks before the application closes. It is possible it may still be passed because Hastings Borough Council do tend to do that. The more people that write in, it might seem trivial because what are a few solar panels in an area where supposedly nobody can see it, but you can see it from the other side of the valley and from space, as we've already seen. It may seem trivial, but it's a bigger picture. We want people to let the council know that we're not sitting back, we're not accepting these things. It's wrong telling us
And
what.
it's another retrospective
And
application.
it's another retrospective.
The late former leader of the council, Mr. Birch, expressly said that the council wasn't going to allow a retrospective. And not only have they allowed it, they put it in a shifty way again, without adequate
No, the
making
clever
it
thing these days are cameras have got nice long lenses. And I'll come back to you in just a second, Alistair.
Okay.
Nice
Ginny
long lenses.
wanted to
And
say
Ginny. Okay, just once I'll just say this and then we can go on to questions, and then that's basically my bit done, just a few more photographs. Long lenses pick out things that you don't realise are there, and I only noticed this a week or so ago when I took this photograph of the solar panels. There's a crack in the soil behind this bunker.
Good.
It looks like it's been there for a few months, looking at old photographs that are not quite so high resolution, but there is land subsidence and movement behind there. Now that's interesting because that's the first time that we've realised that the landslide has gone that far back, and we're not even sure whether Kofi know about that. That's a relatively new finding, and it's only because this was taken from nearly half a mile away with a long lens. Sorry, can we do Ginny?
Thanks. I just wanted to ask whether, since their modus operandi is clearly stick something up, ask for retrospective planning, since they've done it again and again, is there anything, A, in terms of fining or in terms of highlighting it? Because they could continue to do it, particularly if we can't have our drones and so on above it. I mean, how are we going to know if they're building?
We'll know.
Because they cut the trees down so we can all see it.
But I mean, at the same time, it seems completely wrong that they're using this as this is what they do.
Yes, but HBC don't have to go that road. For example, there was a planning control notice put on those solar panels about, what was it, 6 months ago? And it would have been perfectly feasible for HBC to have taken robust enforcement action. But as usual, on every single issue, rather than take any enforcement action, they will allow retrospective planning permission. And so the saga will continue. And we've got no control over that. That is the modus operandi.
So we
and
have
that
to
will
highlight
continue.
it in some
We have to keep going through relatively tedious and low-level objections to every single moving part.
Unfortunately, we appear to be complaining all the time. I will come to Alex. We appear to be complaining all the time, and every letter that we write to the council tends to have what we asked them yesterday and the day before and the week before tacked on the end of it as well, because we just don't get the answers. So we have had several complaints from the council on the size of our letters. It's their doing. If they answer the questions, if they gave us the information that we asked for, then they wouldn't get these letters. But we do, and we are asking questions, and we're waiting for response. I'll take Alistair first, and then I'll come over. Alistair.
Yeah, I'm always a great believer when it comes to trying to force any sort of lobby change in a two-pronged attack. The Historic England letter, which I've read, is quite clear that there are breaches of the Ancient Monuments and Archaeology Act 1979. What it does also say is that it doesn't feel that there is sufficient merit in the spending of public money for a prosecution under the Act for that breaking of the law. However, they do have, I believe, there are powers that Historic England has to then require reparations, I believe. Now, if those panels are within the scheduled action rule, it strikes me that clearly the bunker is, as we know, and certain parts of it. I know that Historic England, it has been difficult to get them to engage in this debate, as it has been with so many other organisations. But they are now engaged. And it strikes me that while they may think that there is not sufficient power to actually force...
I think Chris is going to come in here, actually.
I wonder if, therefore, if they may not actually start to...
Yes, we're sure you're right. Chris is
forcing them to take make some reparations financially.
Chris has actually written a letter, which I was reading a bit of it this morning, to, not actually, what is it? Historic England. Basically what you're saying, that this is now becoming cumulative. This isn't just a one-off that they've done. And they know about it. They've actually been on the site, they've been behind the bunker, they've seen what they've done. They know about our complaints about what they've done, they know about the trees being removed within the monument, they know about the storage unit being built in part of the monument, and that is work in progress at the moment. So yes, you're absolutely right. It's a cumulative thing. We're not going to let them just say, oh, we're not going to take it because it's cut solar panels.
It's relevant to natural England. And the problem with the AONB unit is because of the cuts to funding from natural England, the AONB unit is really tiny and little more than maybe a couple of people now. But at the same time, they themselves may be able to start to see...
It's a little bit weak, but they have actually put in on the solar panels. Have you read that one yet?
Pardon?
Have you read the AONB comment on solar panels?
I haven't read the AONB.
Oh, it was only there a couple of days. It's a bit weak, but it is positive. It's what we want them to say, but it's not very strongly written. So, there's another question from the back.
Well, how hard would it be to initiate a public inquiry, if not to have
Very difficult.
at least to the plants? I mean, how dare they complain to you about sizing of
And absolutely.
Remind them that they actually work for you.
Yes.
Everybody in this room pays their wages.
Yes.
I've seen
But we may, up to now, have been taking the wrong tack. We're fighting with a pen, and lots of people around the country and around the town have said we should be fighting with a sword, and possibly we need to get a lot stronger and come in from a different angle. We believe, to be honest, that by fighting it with properly constructed documents, telling them everything they've done, we haven't lied at all. We know we haven't. Every piece of information that we've given them is absolutely perfect, and it hasn't worked. So there's got to be another angle. And as you said, public inquiry is a thing, but to get it forced, it's incredibly difficult.
We have asked.
We've asked. Nick.
Well, just incidentally, you know that I've had this tiny development in my back garden. Well,
within the monument.
No, just outside. The architect. I mean, I've heard that the architect now advises 90% of clients to go via retrospective planning application because if you go the other route, as I found out myself, it's so long-winded, it's so pernickety over often ludicrous detail that is the situation. So that's kind of on a macro scale what you'll find.
But countrywide, probably not.
Yeah, quite probably.
Yeah.
It's not doing Mr. Fiddler much good, though, is it?
It's not, is it?
So,
I need to move on, otherwise we're on half an hour behind schedule. I'll go through this really, really quickly. Rocklands